In 1954, a divorced single mother from Georgia became the first woman ever to appear on the cover of BusinessWeek. She had taken a failing little plastic company that nobody wanted and turned it into one of the most famous brands in America. Millions of women across the country sold her product. Newspapers called her a genius, and 4 years later, she owned nothing. No stock, no house of her own, no place in the company she had built. The man who ran that company fired her, paid her almost nothing, and then did something colder than that. He erased her. He wiped her name out of the official history. He had the unsold copies of her own autobiography dumped into a pit in the ground near the headquarters and buried. Then he sold the company for $16 million, divorced his wife, and left the country for a life in the tropics. The brand she built would go on to become so famous that its name became a word people use for any plastic box in their kitchen. And 70 years later, that same brand would collapse into bankruptcy, killed by the exact decision that once made it a fortune. This is the story of Tupperware and the woman they tried to bury with it. It began with a chemist and a piece of garbage. Earl Tupper was a self-taught inventor who had worked with the chemical giant DuPont. In the factories of the 1930s, there was a black, smelly, useless waste product left over from oil refining. Almost nobody could do anything with it. Tupper took that waste, a form of polyethylene, and spent years refining it into something new, a material that was light, flexible, unbreakable, and clean. He called it Poly-T. In 1938, he founded his own plastics company, and in 1946, he used his new material to create something that looked almost magical for its time. A container that was soft to the touch, would not shatter, and sealed with a special lid. When you pressed the edge and let the air escape, it made a small burp and locked out moisture and spoilage. He had been inspired by the lid of a paint can. It was, genuinely, a brilliant product. There was just one problem. Nobody knew how to use it. Tupper put his containers on the shelves of hardware stores and department stores, and they sat there. Shoppers picked them up, did not understand the seal, could not make it work, and put them back down. The most advanced food container in the world was quietly failing because a product this new could not sell itself from a shelf. It needed to be shown. It needed to be performed. And Earl Tupper had no idea how to do that. The answer came from a woman he had never met. Her name was Brownie Wise. She had been born in a small town in Georgia in 1913, and her life had been hard. Her parents divorced when she was 2. She dropped out of school as a teenager. She married a violent man, divorced him, and was left a single mother raising her young son alone in the 1940s, at a time when the world had very little use for a woman on her own. To make money, she started selling household products at home parties for a company called Stanley Home Products, and she discovered she was extraordinary at it. When she asked to move up into management, the founder told her not to waste her time. Management, he said, was no place for a woman. So Brownie Wise found a different product. She found Tupperware. She began throwing her own parties, inviting neighbors into a living room, and instead of just describing the containers, she performed them. She would fill one with liquid, seal it, and hurl it across the room. It bounced. Nothing spilled. The women gasped, and they bought. By October of 1949, she had recruited 19 dealers of her own in Detroit. In that single year, her little team sold over $150,000 of Tupperware, more than any store in the country. Earl Tupper noticed. This unknown single mother was outselling his entire retail strategy from a stranger's living room. In 1951, he invited her to run his sales operation as vice president. And that is when everything changed. Brownie Wise walked in and made one radical demand: pull Tupperware out of the stores. All of it. Every shelf, every shop, gone. From now on, she said, this product would only be sold one way: in a home, at a party, by a woman, to other women. It sounds insane. A company voluntarily removing itself from every retail store in the country. But Wise understood something Tupper never had. The product was not the container. The product was the party. She built an entire selling machine out of ordinary housewives. A woman could host a party in her own living room, earn money, and never leave her children or answer to a boss. In an era when married women were expected to stay home, Wise offered them something almost no one else would: an income and a little independence, disguised as an afternoon with friends, and the sales exploded. Tupperware went from struggling to over $2 million in sales by 1952. Wise drove her army with pure theater. In 1954, she created an event called Jubilee, a giant annual convention where her top saleswomen were flown in and rewarded like royalty. At one Jubilee, she buried treasure in a field, real jewelry, appliances, even cars, and sent thousands of women digging in the dirt to claim their prizes. That same year, 1954, she became the first woman to appear on the cover of BusinessWeek. She was the face of the company now, and Earl Tupper, the inventor, was becoming a name almost nobody knew. This was the decision that built the empire. It was also the seed of its death. Think carefully about what Brownie Wise had actually done. She had chained Tupperware, completely and permanently, to one specific kind of person: the stay-at-home housewife. The woman who was in the neighborhood in the middle of the afternoon, free to host a party, free to attend one, surrounded by other women in exactly the same situation. In 1954, that was almost everyone. The suburbs were full of them. The model fit the world perfectly. But a business model is a bet on the world staying the same, and the world was about to change more than anyone in that convention hall could imagine. The very independence that Tupperware sold to women in tiny, safe doses, an afternoon of earning here, a little pocket money there, was about to arrive in full. Real jobs, real careers, real paychecks. The daughters of the women digging for prizes in that field would not want to sell plastic bowls to their neighbors. They would want to be in the office, in the boardroom, in the workforce. And when that day came, Tupperware would discover that it had built its entire kingdom on a foundation that was quietly walking out the front door and going to work. But that reckoning was still years away. First, there was a betrayal to commit. By 1957, Brownie Wise had become too big. She published an autobiography. The press treated her, not Earl Tupper, as the genius behind Tupperware. And Tupper, the man who had actually invented the product, could not stand it. The relationship curdled into resentment. And then, in January of 1958, he moved. He forced Brownie Wise out of the company. The stated reasons were almost insultingly small. At one point, she was accused of harming the company's image by using a Tupperware container as a dog dish. The woman who had built a national sales empire was pushed out over a dog bowl, and here is the cruelty of it. Brownie Wise owned no stock in the company she had made. Her house, her possessions, much of it belonged to Tupperware. She sued for $1.6 million for breach of contract. She settled for around $30,000, roughly a single year of pay. Then Tupper made sure she disappeared. He scrubbed her name from the company's history and had the leftover copies of her autobiography buried in a pit near the headquarters. And within months of getting rid of her, Earl Tupper sold the entire company to the Rexall Drug Corporation for $16 million. He divorced his wife, gave up his American citizenship, and moved to Costa Rica to live out his life as a rich man. Brownie Wise, who had made it all possible, tried to start again with other companies and never came close. She finished her life quietly in Florida. She got the credit for nothing. He got the money for everything. For a while, none of it seemed to matter. The machine Brownie Wise had built was so powerful, it kept running for decades without her. Tupperware spread across the world. By the 2000s, it was sold by nearly 2 million people in dozens of countries, and the name had become a household word. But underneath the success, that original bet was slowly going wrong. The women were leaving. Through the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, American women poured into full-time work. There were fewer and fewer housewives at home in the afternoon to host a party or to attend one. The sales force that Wise had built began to shrink, year after year. Sales in America declined slowly, then faster, and Tupperware struggled to escape the trap of its own genius. The party had made it. Now the party was holding it prisoner. It tried to move into stores again, striking a deal to sell through Target in 2001, but that only angered its own sellers, and it was scrapped within 2 years. It was too slow to move online, too dependent on a way of selling that the modern world had left behind. The debt piled up. By 2023, the company was issuing desperate warnings that it might not survive. Its stock, once a Wall Street favorite, collapsed to about $1.30. In 2024, it closed its last American factory. And on the 18th of September, 2024, Tupperware Brands filed for bankruptcy, carrying around $818 million in obligations. One news headline summed it up in 4 words: "The party is over." There is a strange, bitter symmetry to how this ended. Tupperware was one of the most successful brands in the history of American business. It was so successful that its name stopped being a brand at all and became an ordinary English word. Right now, somewhere in your kitchen, there is almost certainly a plastic container that you would call Tupperware, even though it was probably made by someone else entirely. That is the rarest kind of victory a company can win, to have your name become the name of the thing itself. And it still went completely broke. The company was undone by the same decision that once saved it. Brownie Wise pulled it out of the stores and tied it to the living rooms of stay-at-home women, and for a generation, that was the smartest move in American retail. But the world moved on, and Tupperware could not. And the human symmetry is just as sharp. The woman who saw exactly how to sell this product, who performed it, who built the army, walked away with $30,000 and had her memory buried in a hole. The man who owned the patent walked away with $16 million and a house on a tropical coast. One of them understood people. The other one owned the paper. And in the end, the paper was worth more. So what is the lesson buried in all of this? The first one is about business, and it is uncomfortable. The thing that makes a company succeed and the thing that eventually kills it are very often the same thing. Tupperware did not fail because it made a bad decision. It failed because it made a brilliant one and then never let go of it. It found a perfect fit with the world of 1954 and married itself to that world so completely that when the world changed, the company could not. A strength held onto for too long becomes a weakness. The second lesson is about people, and it is older than any business. It is about who gets remembered. Earl Tupper had the invention and the ownership, and for a long time, he made sure history remembered only him. He buried the woman who built his empire, literally and figuratively. But history has a way of digging things back up. Today, there is a park named after Brownie Wise. Her papers sit in the Smithsonian. Books and films tell her story. And the company that erased her is gone, bankrupt, its name a fading word on old plastic bowls. He tried to bury her. In the end, she outlasted the empire. The greatest companies almost never die from a single enemy. They die from a decision made long ago, in a moment of triumph, that quietly turns to poison as the world moves on. Tupperware is not the only empire that built its own trap. If you want to see how the biggest names in history rose to the top and then toppled, subscribe and watch the next story. Because behind every household name, there is usually someone who was written out of it, and their stories are just getting started.